Welcome to the Folk Keeper's Hearth, where timeless tales and ancient lore come alive. Gather round as we explore the myths, legends, and fables that have been passed down through the generations, keeping us connected to our ancestors and the old ways. Do you have your cup of tea? Have you pulled up a chair? It is time. Let us begin. Elphin Irving, the Fairies' Cupbearer. The romantic vale of Coreywater in Ennaej is regarded by the inhabitants, a pastoral and unmingled people, as the last border refuge of those beautiful and capricious beings, the fairies. Many old people yet living recall that they have had intercourse of good words and good deeds with the good folk, and continue to tell that in the ancient of days the fairies danced on the hill and revelled in the glen, and showed themselves, like the mysterious children of the deity of old, among the sons and daughters of men. Their visits to the earth were periods of joy and mirth to mankind, rather than of sorrow and apprehension. They played on musical instruments of wonderful sweetness and variety of note, spread unexpected feasts, the supernatural flavor of which overpowered on many occasions the religious scruples of the Presbyterian shepherds, performed wonderful deeds of horsemanship, and marched in midnight processions when the sound of their elfin minstrelsy charmed youths and maidens into love for their persons and pursuits. And more than one family of Coreywater have the fame of augmenting the numbers of the elfin chivalry. Faces of friends and relatives long since doomed to the battle trench or the deep sea have been recognized by those who dared to gaze on the fairy march. The maid has seen her lost lover, and the mother her stolen child, and the courage to plan and achieve their deliverance has been possessed by at least one border maiden. In the legends of the people of Coreyvale, there is a singular mixture of elfin and human adventure, and the traditional story of the cupbearer to the Queen of the Fairies appeals alike to our domestic feelings and imagination. In one of the little green loops, or bends, on the banks of Coreywater, mouldered walls and a few stunted wild plum trees and vagrant roses still point out the site of a cottage and garden. A well of pure spring water leaps out from an old tree root before the door, and here the shepherds, shading themselves in summer from the influence of the sun, tell to their children the wild tale of Elphin Irving and his sister Femi. And singular as the story seems, it has gained full credence among the people where the scene is laid. When Elphin Irving and his sister Femi were in their 16th year, for tradition says they were twins, their father was drowned in Coreywater, attempting to save his sheep from a sudden swell to which all mountain streams are liable, and their mother, on the day of her husband's burial, laid down her head on the pillow, from which, on the 7th day, it was lifted to be dressed for the same grave. The inheritance left to the orphans may be briefly described: 17 acres of plough and pasture land, 7 milk cows, and 7 pot sheep. Many old people take delight in odd numbers. And to this may be added 7 bonnet pieces of Scottish gold, and a broadsword and spear, which their ancestor had wielded with such strength and courage in the battle of Dryfe Sands, that the minstrel who sang of that deed of arms ranked him only second to the Scots and Johnstones. The youth and his sister grew in stature and in beauty. The brent bright brow, the clear blue eye, and frank and blithe deportment of the former gave him some influence among the young women of the valley, while the latter was no less the admiration of the young men, and at fair and dance and at bridal happy was he who touched but her hand or received the benediction of her eye. Like all other Scottish beauties, she was the theme of many a song, and while tradition is yet busy with the singular history of her brother, song has taken all the care that rustic minstrelsy can of the gentleness of her spirit and the charms of her person. But minstrel skill and true love tale seemed to want their usual influence when they sought to win her attention. She was only observed to pay most respect to those youths who were most beloved by her brother, and the same hour that brought these twins to the world seemed to have breathed through them a sweetness and an affection of heart and mind, which nothing could divide. If, like the virgin queen of the immortal poet, she walked in maiden meditation fancy-free, her brother Elphin seemed alike touched with the charms of the fairest maidens in Corey. He ploughed his field, he reaped his grain, he leaped, he ran, and wrestled, and danced, and sang, with more skill and life and grace than all other youths of the district. But he had no twilight and stolen interviews. When all other young men had their loves by their side, he was single, though not unsought, and his joy seemed never perfect save when his sister was near him. If he loved to share his time with her, she loved to share her time with him alone, or with the beasts of the field, or the birds of the air. She watched her little flock late, and she tended it early, not for the sordid love of the fleece, unless it was to make mantles for her brother, but with the look of one who had joy in its company. The very wild creatures, the deer and the hares, seldom sought to shun her approach, and the bird forsook not its nest, nor stinted its song when she drew nigh. Such is the confidence which maiden innocence and beauty inspire. It happened one summer, about 3 years after they became orphans, that rain had been for a while withheld from the earth. The hillsides began to parch, the grass in the vales to wither, and the stream of Corey was diminished between its banks to the size of an ordinary rill. The shepherds drove their flocks to moorlands, and marsh and tarn had their reeds invaded by the scythe to supply the cattle with food. The sheep of his sister were Elphin's constant care. He drove them to the moistest pastures during the day, and he often watched them at midnight, when flocks, tempted by the sweet dewy grass, are known to browse eagerly, that he might guard them from the fox, and lead them to the choicest herbage. In these nocturnal watchings he sometimes drove his little flock over the water of Corey, for the fords were hardly ankle deep, or permitted his sheep to cool themselves in the stream, and taste the grass which grew along the brink. All this time not a drop of rain fell, nor did a cloud appear in the sky. One evening, during her brother's absence with the flock, Femi sat at her cottage door, listening to the bleatings of the distant folds and the lessened murmur of the water of Corey, now scarcely audible beyond its banks. Her eyes, weary with watching along the accustomed line of road for the return of Elphin, were turned on the pool beside her, in which the stars were glimmering fitful and faint. As she looked, she imagined the water grew brighter and brighter. A wild illumination presently shone upon the pool, and leaped from bank to bank, and suddenly changing into a human form, ascended the margin, and, passing her, glided swiftly into the cottage. The visionary form was so like her brother in shape and air, that, starting up, she flew into the house with the hope of finding him in his customary seat. She found him not, and, impressed with the terror with which a wraith or apparition seldom fails to inspire, she uttered a shriek so loud and so piercing as to be heard at Johnstone Bank, on the other side of the Vale of Corey. It is hardly known how long Femi Irving continued in a state of insensibility. The morning was far advanced, when a neighboring maiden found her seated in an old chair, as white as a monumental marble, her hair, about which she had always been solicitous, loosened from its curls, and hanging disordered over her neck and bosom, her hands and forehead. The maiden touched the one and kissed the other. They were as cold as snow, and her eyes, wide open, were fixed on her brother's empty chair with the intensity of gaze of one who had witnessed the appearance of a spirit. She seemed insensible of anyone's presence, and sat fixed and still and motionless, The maiden, alarmed at her looks, thus addressed her. "Femi, lass, Femi, Irving. Dear me, but this be awful. I've come to tell ye that 7 of your pet sheep have escaped, drowning in the water, for Corey, so quiet and sae gentle yestreen, is rolling and dashing from bank to bank this morning. Dear me, woman, dinna let the loss of the world's gear bereave ye of your senses. I would rather make ye a present of a dozen muggews of the Tinwald brood myself. And now I think on't, if ye'll send over Elphin, I will help him with them in the gloaming myself. So, Femi woman, be comforted." At the mention of her brother's name, she cried out, "Where is he? Oh, where is he?" gazed wildly round, and shuddering from head to foot, fell senseless on the floor. Other inhabitants of the valley, alarmed by the sudden swell of the river, which had augmented to a torrent, deep and impassable, now came in to inquire if any loss had been sustained, for numbers of sheep and heads of hay had been observed floating down about the dawn of the morning. They assisted in reclaiming the unhappy maiden from her swoon, but insensibility was joy compared to the sorrow to which she awakened. "They have ta'en him away, they have ta'en him away," she chanted, in a tone of delirious pathos. "Him that was whiter and fairer than the lily on Liddel Lee, they have long sought, and they have long sued, and they had the power to prevail against my prayers at last. They have ta'en him away, the flower is plucked from among the weeds, and the dove is slain amid a flock of ravens. They came with shout, and they came with song, and they spread the charm, and they placed the spell, and the earthen brow has been bowed down to the invisible hand. They have ta'en him away, they have ta'en him away. He was too lovely, and too good, and too noble to bless us with his continuance on earth. For what are the sons of men compared to him? The light of the moonbeam to the morning sun, the glowworm to the eastern star. They have ta'en him away, the invisible dwellers of the earth. I saw them come on him with shouting and with singing, and they charmed him where he sat, and away they bore him. And the horse he rode was never shod with iron, nor owned before the mastery of human hand. They have ta'en him away, over the water, and over the wood, and over the hill. I got but ae look of his bonny blue ee, but ae look. But as I have endured what never maiden endured, so will I undertake what never maiden undertook. I will win him from them all. I know the invisible ones of the earth. I have heard their wild and wondrous music in the wild woods. And there shall an earthen maid seek him, and achieve his deliverance." She paused, and glancing around a circle of condoling faces, down which the tears were dropping like rain, said in a calm and altered, but still delirious tone, "Why do you weep, Mary Halliday? And why do you weep, John Graham? Ye think that Elphin Irving, oh, it's a bonny, bonny name, and dear to many a maiden's heart, as well as mine. Ye think he is drowned in Corey, and ye will seek in the deep, deep pools for the bonny, bonny corse, that ye may weep over it, as it lies in its last linen, and lay it amid weeping and wailing in the dowie kirkyard. Ye may seek, but ye shall never find. So leave me to trim up my hair, and prepare my dwelling, and make myself ready to watch for the hour of his return to upper earth." And she resumed her household labours with an alacrity which lessened not the sorrow of her friends. Meanwhile, the rumour flew over the vale that Elphin Irving was drowned in Corey water. Matron and maid, old man and young, collected suddenly along the banks of the river, which now began to subside to its natural summer limits, and commenced their search, interrupted every now and then by calling from side to side, and from pool to pool, and by exclamations of sorrow for this misfortune. The search was fruitless. 5 sheep pertaining to the flock which he conducted to pasture were found drowned in one of the deep eddies. But the river was still too brown from the soil of its moorland sources to enable them to see what its deep shelves, its pools, and its overhanging and hazily banks concealed. They remitted further search till the stream should become pure, and Old Man, taking Old Man aside, began to whisper about the mystery of the youth's disappearance. Old women laid their lips to the ears of their coevals, and talked of Elphin Irving's fairy parentage, and his having been dropped by an unearthly hand into an earthen cradle. The young men and maids conversed on other themes. They grieved for the loss of the friend and the lover, and while the former thought that a heart so kind and true was not left in the vale, the latter thought, as maidens will, on his handsome person, gentle manners, and merry blue eye, and speculated with a sigh on the time when they might have hoped a return for their love. They were soon joined by others who had heard the wild and delirious language of his sister. The old belief was added to the new assurance, and both again commented upon by minds full of superstitious feeling, and hearts full of supernatural fears, till the youths and maidens of Corrievale held no more love trysts for 7 days and nights, lest, like Elphin Irving, they should be carried away to augment the ranks of the earthen chivalry. It was curious to listen to the speculations of the peasantry. "For my part," said a youth, "if I were sure that poor Elphin escaped from that perilous water, I would not give the fairies a pound of hiplock wool for their chance of him. There has not been a fairy seen in the land since Donald Cargill, the Cameronian, conjured them into the Solway for playing on their pipes during one of his nocturnal preachings on the hip of the Burnswick Hill." "Preserve me, bairn," said an old woman, justly exasperated at the incredulity of her nephew. "If ye winna believe what I both heard and saw at the moonlight end of Craigie Burnwood on a summer night, rank after rank of the fairy folk, ye'll at least believe a douce man and a ghostly professor, even the late minister of Tinweld Kirk. His only son, I mind the lad weel, with his long yellow locks and his bonny blue eyes, when I was but a gilpie of a lassie, he was stolen away from off the horse at his father's elbow as they crossed that false and fearsome water, even Locher Brig flow, on the night of the midsummer fair of Dumfries. Aye, who can doubt the truth of that? Have not the godly inhabitants of Elmsfield town and Tinwald Kirk seen the sweet youth riding at midnight in the midst of the unhallowed troop, to the sound of flute and of dulcimer? And though meikle they prayed, naebody tried to achieve his deliverance." "I have heard it said by douce folk and sponsible," interrupted another, "that every 7 years the elves and fairies pay Cain, or make an offering of one of their children to the grand enemy, and that they are permitted to purloin one of the children of men to present to the fiend. A more acceptable offering, I'll warrant, than one of their own infernal brood. And touching his lost lad, ye all ken his mother was a hawk of an uncanny nest, a second cousin of Kate Kimmer, of Barsfloshan, as rank a witch as ever rode on ragwort. Aye, sirs, what's bred in the bone is ill to come out of the flesh." On these and similar topics, which a peasantry full of ancient tradition and enthusiasm and superstition readily associate with the commonest occurrences of life, the people of Corrievale continued to converse till the fall of evening, when each, seeking their home, renewed again the wondrous subject, and illustrated it with all that popular belief and poetic imagination could so abundantly supply. The night which followed this melancholy day was wild with wind and rain. The river came down broader and deeper than before, and the lightning, flashing by fits over the green woods of Corrie, showed the ungovernable and perilous flood sweeping above its banks. It happened that a farmer, returning from one of the border fairs, encountered the full swing of the storm, but mounted on an excellent horse and mantled from chin to heel in a good grey plaid, beneath which he had the further security of a thick great coat. He sat dry in his saddle, and proceeded in the anticipated joy of a subsided tempest and a glowing morning sun. As he entered the long grove, or rather remains of the old Galwegian forest, which lines for some space the banks of the Corey water, the storm began to abate. The wind sighed milder and milder among the trees, and here and there a star, twinkling momentarily through the sudden wrack of the clouds, showed the river raging from bank to brae. As he shook the moisture from his clothes, he was not without a wish that the day would dawn, and that he might be preserved on a road which his imagination beset with greater perils than the raging river, for his superstitious feeling let loose upon his path elf and goblin, and the current traditions of the district supplied very largely to his apprehension the ready materials of fear. Just as he emerged from the wood, where a fine sloping bank, covered with short greensward, skirts the limit of the forest, his horse made a full pause, snorted, trembled, and started from side to side, stooped his head, erected his ears, and seemed to scrutinize every tree and bush. The rider, too, it may be imagined, gazed round and peered warily into every suspicious-looking place. His dread of a supernatural visitation was not much allayed when he observed a female shape seated on the ground at the root of a huge old oak tree, which stood in the centre of one of those patches of verdant sward known by the name of fairy rings, and avoided by all peasants who wished to prosper. A long, thin gleam of eastern daylight enabled him to examine accurately the being who, in this wild place, an unusual hour, gave additional terror to this haunted spot. She was dressed in white, from the neck to the knees. Her arms, long and round and white, were perfectly bare. Her head, uncovered, allowed her long hair to descend in ringlet succeeding ringlet, till the half of her person was nearly concealed in the fleece. Amidst the whole, her hands were constantly busy in shedding aside the tresses which interposed between her steady and uninterrupted gaze, down a line of old road which winded among the hills to an ancient burial ground. As the traveller continued to gaze, the figure suddenly rose, and, wringing the rain from her long locks, paced round and round the tree, chanting in a wild and melancholy manner an equally wild and delirious song. The small bird's head is under its wing, the deer sleeps on the grass. The moon comes out, and the stars shine down, the dew gleams like the glass. There is no sound in the world so wide, save the sound of the smitten brass, with the merry cittern and the pipe of the fairies as they pass. But oh, the fire maun burn, and the hour is gone and will never return. The green hill cleaves, and forth with a bound comes elf and elfin steed. The moon dives down in a golden cloud, the stars grow dim with dread. But a light is running along the earth, so of heavens they have no need. O'er moor and moss with a shout they pass, and the word is spur and speed. But the fire maun burn, and I maun quake, and the hour is gone that will never come back. And when they came to Craigieburn wood, the queen of the fairies spoke, "Come bind your steeds to the rushes so green, and dance by the haunted oak." I found the acorn on Heshbon hill, in the nook of a palmer's poke. 1,000 years since, here it grows, and they danced till the greenwood shook. But oh, the fire, the burning fire, the longer it burns, it but blazes the higher. "I have won me a youth," the elf queen said, "the fairest that earth may see. This night I have won young elf Irving, my cupbearer to be. His service lasts but for 7 sweet years, and his wage is a kiss of me." and merrily, merrily laughed the wild elves round Corey's greenwood tree. But oh, the fire, it glows in my brain, and the hour is gone, and comes not again. The queen she has whispered a secret word, "Come hither, my Elphin sweet, and bring that cup of the charmed wine, thy lips and mine to meet." But a brown elf shouted a loud, loud shout, "Come leap on your coursers afleet, for here comes the smell of some earthen flesh, and the sound of earthen feet." But oh, the fire that burns and maun burn, for the time that is gone will never return. On a steed as white as the new milked milk, the elf queen leaped with a bound, and young Elphin, a steed like December snow, 'neath him at the word he found. But a maiden came, and her earthen arms she linked her brother around, and called on the gods, and the steed with a snort sank into the gaping ground. But the fire maun burn, and I maun quake, and the time that is gone will no more come back. And she held her brother, and lo, he grow a wild bull waked in ire. And she held her brother, and lo, he changed to a river roaring higher. And she held her brother, and he became a flood of the raging fire. She shrieked and sank, and the wild elves laughed till the mountain rang and mire. But oh, the fire yet burns in my brain, and the hour is gone, and comes not again. O maiden, why waxed thy faith so faint, thy spirit so slack and slaw? Thy courage kept good till the flame waxed wood, then thy might begin to thaw. Had ye kissed him with thy earthen lip, ye had won him free 'mong us aye. Now bless the fire, the elfin fire, that made thee faint and fey. Now bless the fire, the elfin fire, the longer it burns, it blazes the higher. At the close of this unusual strain, the figure sat down on the grass and proceeded to bind up her long and disordered tresses, gazing along the old and unfrequented road. "Now the gods be my helper," said the traveller, who happened to be the laird of Johnstone Bank. "Can this be a trick of the fiend? Or can it be bonny Femi Irving who chants this dolorous song? Something sad has befallen that makes her seek her seat in this eerie nook, amid the darkness and tempest. Through might from a boon I will go on and see." And the horse, feeling something of the owner's reviving spirit in the application of spur steel, bore him at once to the foot of the tree. The poor delirious maiden uttered a yell of piercing joy as she beheld him, and with the swiftness of a creature winged, linked her arms round the rider's waist and shrieked till the woods rang. "Oh, I have ye now, Elphin, I have ye now!" And she strained him to her bosom with a convulsive grasp. "What ails you, my bonny lass?" said the laird of Johnstone Bank, his fears of the supernatural vanishing when he beheld her sad and bewildered look. She raised her eyes at the sound, and, seeing a strange face, her arms slipped their hold, and she dropped with a groan on the ground. The morning had now fairly broke. The flocks shook the rain from their sides. The shepherds hastened to inspect their charges, and a thin blue smoke began to stream from the cottages of the valley into the brightening air. The laird carried Femi Irving in his arms, till he observed 2 shepherds ascending from one of the loops of Coreywater, bearing the lifeless body of her brother. They had found him whirling round and round in one of the numerous eddies, and his hands, clutched and filled with wool, showed that he had lost his life in attempting to save the flock of his sister. A plaid was laid over the body, which, along with the unhappy maiden in a half-lifeless state, was carried into a cottage and laid in that apartment distinguished among the peasantry by the name of the chamber. While the peasant's wife was left to take care of Femi, old man and matron and maid had collected around the drowned youth, and each began to relate the circumstances of his death, when the door suddenly opened, and his sister, advancing to the corpse with a look of delirious serenity, broke out into a wild laugh, and said, Oh, it is wonderful! It's truly wonderful! That bare and death-cold body, dragged from the darkest pool of Corey, with its hands filled with fine wool, wears the perfect smilitude of my own Elphin. I tell ye, the spiritual dwellers of the earth, the fairy folk of our evening tale, have stolen the living body and fashioned this cold and inanimate clod to mislead your pursuit. In common eyes, this seems all that Elphin Irving would be, had he sunk in Corey water. But so it seems not to me. Ye have sought the living soul, and ye have found only its garment. But oh, if ye had beheld him as I beheld him tonight, riding among the elfin troop, the fairest of them all! Had you clasped him in your arms, and wrestled for him with spirits in terrible shapes from the other world, till your heart quailed and your flesh was subdued, then would ye yield no credit to the semblance which this cold and apparent flesh bears to my brother. But hearken! On Hallowmas Eve, when the spiritual people are let loose on earth for a season, I will take my stand in the burial ground of Corey, and when my Elphin and his troop come past, with the sound of all their minstrelsy, I will leap on him and win him, or perish forever. All gazed aghast on the delirious maiden, and many of her auditors gave more credence to her distempered speech than to the visible evidence before them. As she turned to depart, she looked round, and suddenly sunk upon the body, with tears streaming from her eyes, and sobbed out, "My brother! Oh, my brother!" She was carried out insensible, and again recovered, but relapsed into her ordinary delirium, in which she continued till the Hallow Eve after her brother's burial. She was found seated in the ancient burial ground, her back against a broken gravestone, her locks white with frost rime, watching with intensity of look the road to the kirkyard. But the spirit which gave life to the fairest form of all the maids of Annandale was fled forever. Such is the singular story which the peasants know by the name of Elphin Irving, the Fairies' Cupbearer, and the title, in its fullest and most supernatural sense, still obtains credence among the industrious and virtuous dames of the romantic Vale of Corey. Thank you for joining me for this Scottish folktale. All of the stories on this channel were sourced in the public domain and were collected, edited, and published by folklorists during the 19th and 20th centuries. I will be adding a new tale from somewhere in Northern Europe every Sunday, so please subscribe and come back for the next one. Until then, goodbye.